let's get started. What we're going to cover today is kind of like how JavaScript runs a little bit and how it's very different from what you know already about Ruby. So let's take a look at how Ruby understands sort of scope. And then what we'll do is we'll jump into how JavaScript understands scope. So here I'm just defining a variable, right? Look, notice that I have to do all this nonsense, all right? None of that. I just drop a little variable action. Do you remember that? Ruby's so great. And then it's just this string. Chris and Mike, right? And Ali, powerful. Let's just drop an emoji in there. Look at that, gains. And then I just have a method here. It's called sayName. All it does is, okay, what the? Oh, okay, that was weird. All right, all it does is it puts this name variable right here. And then I invoke the method. Notice that I don't have to use the bananas in Ruby, although this will in fact work. Ruby has really nice syntactical sugar that if there is no arguments, I can invoke the method simply by writing the method name. Versus what would happen in JavaScript if I simply put the function name. What was that? That is correct. It's simply a reference to the function, but here it's actually the invocation. So if I drop these bananas, I'm also invoking it. It's just that syntactical sugar. So who thinks this will run like a champ, right? This is good? Yep. So what should I see if I were to go and run, let me clear this. That's weird. If I were to run the file name, which is scope.rb, if I were to just simply put ruby scope.rb, what should I see? Okay, cool. All right, let's test. It says undefined local variable method name. And so if you remember, got you, I fooled you. You have to actually pass in some sort of argument in here. And if I wanted name, right, I'm going to print the argument. Oop, oop. And then here, I need to pass in the name variable. You remember that? A little tricky, a little sneaky, right? And so if you notice, Ruby's scope is a little bit different from JavaScript. You can't simply reference things outside of the method like you can in JavaScript. Ruby doesn't allow that. You have to pass in additional arguments that you want. And so let's take a look at how JavaScript is just a little bit different. So with JavaScript, let's do that exact same thing. Bloop, bloop, bloop. I'm going to open index.html. Oops. Embarrassing. Cool. All right. So I'm going to open up Chrome DevTools. And let's take a look. I'm going to open up this. Oops. Cool. So let's actually recreate this exact same functionality, but in JavaScript. So do. Powerful. Cool. So how would I do this in JavaScript? How would I declare a variable in JavaScript? var. That's right, var. Very good, class. There's a var. Just talk to myself. Like, I'm not crazy. And we have a var name, right? And that's going to be Seabass is a bad boy. Oh, y'all thought I was going somewhere else, huh? Is a cool guy, right? And then instead of def, I just have function. And that's going to be called sayName. Notice how Ruby uses that little, like, how do you describe this? That's right, snake case. Be good. And this is the camel case. Oh, powerful. And then I have to tell it, hey, you're going to get arguments. Just kidding, none. And then it's simply going to console log, right? And what's it going to console log? Name? Yes, no, yes, yes? No, we want the variable name, right? And so here we can just get rid of this trash Ruby. And this is essentially exactly the same. And then the last thing I need to do is invoke it. So is this being invoked? No, this is being invoked, right? So let's take a look and see what happens. I can just slide the code over here, bloop. And then I can open up the browser. Bloop. And then if I refresh, it in fact runs. So what we can see here is that this is a global variable. And the way that JavaScript will look for its scope is going to be, first it's going to look inside. And then it's going to look outside the scope of function onto the global to see if there are any variables, where Ruby will not do that. So given that exactly, if, however, I had another var called name, and that is going to be JK, Ali, powerful. All right, what will this console log be? There it is. And so the idea is that first it will look inside, and if it doesn't exist, it will look outside all the way to the global. Now, functions, right, there's scope within themselves. So let's just say I had another function, right, scoped. Bloop, 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 bloop. And then I had a var name. Let me get rid of this. Bloop, as true as it is. And a var name to your boy. But I've been drinking a lot of this. You've seen LaCroix? Spelling is bizarre, right? I know. And then I were to console log powerful. Notice how I've defined var here, the name, and I'm logging name. What will say name be, knowing that I have a var name here and a var name here? Who thinks it's Seabass? Who thinks it's going to be your boy because it's on a line lower than Seabass? Who thinks I'm trying to trick you? Throw back powerful mic chain. Bless up. Okay, cool. Let's find out. Bloop. It's Seabass. All right? And the idea is here that when I look at this, is there a variable called name inside this? No. And so it's going to look on the outer scope and see name. If I got rid of this, what do you think will happen to name? Do you think that this function variable will be accessed inside this function? Who says yes? Who says no? Cool. The answer is no. Be good. Powerful. So what should I see instead? What will name be? Undefined, right? Because I'm basically referencing a variable that I've never assigned any value to. It will be, what would you think? Let's check. Ready? If I were to do a little bit of this, return name, what should I get? Chrome Dev Tools. It should be undefined. Yeah, I'm basically just using this. It's very interesting. Dang it, Dev Tools. Let's try it. Ready? Bloop. Bloop. Say my name, say my name. Where did I? Oh, it's saved from here. Yeah, sorry. Embarrassing. Embarrassing. This is what is known as like Chrome Dev Tools. You made too many powerful updates. Caching. It saved it in memory. All right. The idea is that yeah, this is just not going to work. It should come back as undefined, actually.
Can we try with a different variable that we haven't defined?
Sure, we can do that. Say name 2. Return name.
3.
Oh, 3. Wow, really going for it there. All right, let's go for it. What is say name 2? Bloop, bloop. Correct. It is not defined. Oh, you're totally right. Oh, because I'm returning it. Yeah. Console log is different. Either way, yeah. Basically, never defined this variable anywhere. I never declared it, and so naturally it'll be busted. Console log would have came back as undefined. But either way, I can't trust Chrome DevTools right now. Are there any questions as to like the function scoping and how it's different from Ruby? It looks from the inside to the outside. Those powerful notes. Powerful. All right, let's keep going. Bloop. Oh, Andrew. Send it.
Will a variable look, is there a limit to like how many scopes a variable might look for what it could be defined as? Like let's say it's a variable in a function, you got a regular variable just on the main.
On the global.
Yeah. Will it always find it even if it's a variable in like three functions?
Yes. The question is like, at what point does JavaScript stop looking for variables? And it will look from the inside all the way out until it hits the global. So in the same way that Ruby, you can simply hack this if you wanted to, and you can go bloop. All right, have you seen this before, this $sign? All right, what is this $sign? I'm essentially establishing a global variable, right? It means that it's available anywhere and everywhere in my application. So it's not exactly the same when it comes to JavaScript as we've determined here, right? We have like different sort of scopes. And so let's get into that a little bit more. If I have like a nested function, right? So I can do this, return another function. I don't want to get into that yet. Let's keep going. That gets a little dicey. All right, cool. Is that a question or? All right. Boop, boop, boop. All right. We have three types of scope. We have global, function, and block. So when I say global, I just mean that a variable, when it's declared on the global scope, meaning there is literally, it's not nested inside anything. Notice that this var right here, it's not inside a function. It's not inside a block, it's not inside an object, it's not inside anything. It's just on the main line as far left as you can possibly go. It's not indented, so that means it's not inside of another function or an object. Cool? This means that it's global. It's defined and available everywhere. We talked a little bit about function scope, and that is the variables that I declare within a function are available within that function and are not accessible within the global scope. So it is a one-way lookup. That means that, let's say I have say name, right? Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of this. I have var name. Let's make another. Someone give me like a variable name. Not a name, right? Very good. All right, cool. And this just returns an empty string. It does nothing. Can I access not a name here? If I were to simply try to do my best and console log this right here, will this be what I think it is? No, it won't work because the lookup is only from the inside out. From the global, I cannot enter into function scope. All right? So, if I were to tell you that the function scope, the variables are confined to the functions which they are declared, and these variables are not accessible on the global, will this make sense to you? It's what's important. Okay, cool. And the last real thing is what is known as block scope. So block scope is anything between these curly brackets, right? I'm going to call them curly boys. If that bothers you, just let me know. I'd be happy to change them back to curly brackets. I just think it's, I don't know, I think it's silly and funny. I don't know. Cool. All right, so yeah, just anything between these curly boys, all right? So what that means is, when have you seen something like a block scope before? Well, sure, Ruby, right? But what if, right? There we go. All right, 6 All right, I don't know. It's just like x is greater than 6, and then what comes after that? That's right, the block. This right here is the block. This is block scoped, meaning if I declare a variable inside and I try to access it, this is an uncaught reference error. Block var is not defined. So in the same way that function scoping works, it doesn't work from the outside in. Like I cannot access block var from the outside. But if I were to do something inside this block, then I would have access to it. So if I had a variable here, right, var cool equals to an array 1, 2, 3. And then inside the block, I try to console log cool. Inside the block scope, it has access to it. But if outside the block, I try to console log cool, will it exist? No, it doesn't exist. All right, so function scoping, block scoping, and then global scope. Are there any questions between the difference between the three? Everything is from the inside, and it looks outward. It is a one-way lookup. Yeah, I'm going to get into that. We're going to talk about var, let, and const, but that's the idea. All right, so block scope gets a little bit tricky because we're going to talk about some exceptions.
So we said if the true, it should work.
Hmm?
We said if true, cancel that block, it should work. It is true, makes block cool.
Like this. And then if I, what is cool? This is the var keyword. The var will leave the block.
I meant it would do that because it's true, because x greater than 6 wasn't true.
Yeah. You're correct. So the idea here is that the var will leave the block, and we're going to get into that. And it's like really wacky. All right. So did you like read in your readings like var, let, and const? Cool. Is anyone comfortable with the differences between the three? Does anyone want to try explaining them? Huh? There are reasons to use var, and var is very prominent and exists. But modern JavaScript typically is you should be sticking to let and const for probably like 99% of your code. Cool. Does anyone know the actual differences between them?
Change, but right, the const is like you can't reassign it.
You cannot reassign let and const. No, you're right. You can reassign let, cannot reassign const. It's more. Anything else? Yeah, var, let, and const are a bit tricky. So let's go into the main differences between them, right? So let's talk about var. var can be reassigned and redeclared as many times as you want. So for example, right, I have var, we have like Brandon equals to the boss. Right, Brandon's our boss, no big deal. I can also take a look at what Brandon is, and I can reassign it to cool guy, and then I get Brandon. I can also redeclare the variable Brandon, like this, var Brandon again, and say, huh, that was weird. So let's take a look at Brandon. What do you think it is? That's right, that was weird. I can declare it, right, with the var keyword, assign it, and assign it as many times as I want. You can start to imagine now that the var keyword can be a bit tricky to use in the way that because it can be reassigned and redeclared as many times as possible, if your code becomes 10, 15, 20 files, and each one of those files is like 100, 150 lines of code, if you redeclare any variable, it'll just work. And you could probably imagine that that might break your code from earlier. And so that's why var, we're trying to like get away from var, right? It's a bit tricky. Let's take a look at let, right? I can have let Allie, right? Who is awesome. This right here is what? The declaration or the assigning? Right, I'm just declaring it. And this half with the assignment operator is what? Assignment, right? Very good. Yeah, I'm trying to make it easy for you, you know? Cool. But let's do this. Let's say Allie, right, who is awesome, is also vsmart. What would happen? What's Allie? It's vsmart. But can I let Allie, right, do this? Cool. Uncut syntax error. The identifier, Allie, has already been declared. So what we've learned is that let does not allow you to redeclare, but allows you to reassign as many times as you want. Right? Let's take a look at const. Right? We have const, right? Sebi. Right? Nice hat. He's got this Castlevania hat on. It's pretty cool. If you're into that kind of stuff, which I am. No big deal. So I am doing what two things with this one line of code? Okay. All right.
Declaring and assigning.
Yes, I'm declaring and assigning. The reason I want you to actually participate and say is because I need you to actually like say it out loud. Only because, again, just trying to help you out here, like in an interview, you're gonna need to be able to say these words technically. And I promise you, even in your mind, if you're like saying the right answer under your breath, inside your mind, saying it out loud is an absolute game changer. And here's what I mean by that. Who feels comfortable with Ruby? Who feels comfortable with Rails? Cool. Can any of you give any of the Rails lectures? It's tough. I would like to take you up on that offer, actually. Yeah, notes, yeah, for sure. Notes for sure. Yeah. And that's the idea, right? The idea is that you just need to be able to say it, right? And it's kind of dicey. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. So, cool. We are both declaring and assigning at the same time. So, what is Sebi? Nice hat. But can I do this? Can I reassign what Sebi is? Right? Interesting. Type error, assignment to a constant variable. I cannot do that. But what happens here? Can I do something knowing that const like ya boy? Would something like this work? Well, before we get to that, because I'll let you like stew on that for a second, would this work? Let ya boy.
Yes.
This would work. Why? Because I can reassign it, right? I can always go, your boy is now, guess what? Your girl, your girl, right? Whatever. I don't know, is that not too dicey over here? All right, anyways, the point is, I can reassign let. So it allows me to just declare the variable. If I do const, right, table, why would this break on me? Because I can never reassign it. Why would it let me even declare a variable that has no original value that I know I can never reassign? So that makes sense to me. And so that's kind of the main differences. Remember, var, I can assign and redeclare as many times as I want. Let, I can declare once and reassign as many times as I want. And const can only be declared and assigned one time. Cool? Who feels a little bit more comfortable about the differences between var, let, const? For Sheezy. All right, so let's think. Var is not block scoped. So here's what I mean by that. This is going to be tricky, so I'm just going to give you an example, right? Who's seen a for loop before? Cool. Help me write one. I have for, and then I have, oh, yes, bananas, plus plus. Thank you. And then I have what? Let or var, okay. Let's try var. I equals to? Sure.
Simple.
Right. So I'm going to end that statement. I'm going to start a new one.
I, and then is less than, or less than. Array, like, whatever.
Let's just inline write it, which is kind of cool, right? Watch this. Boop, boop, boop. Powerful. Okay.
Simple, and then the iterator, I.
The incrementer, but very close, yes. I know what you're saying. Smart. And then?
And then curly braces.
The block, right? Smart. Cool. And what do I want to do here?
Implement code.
Cool. Can I just console log I? So what should I get? 0, 1, 2, right? NBD, no big deal. What is I right now? If I were to just ask for I. I is 3, because remember, I plus plus. It came back here and said, is 3 less than 3? No, and it did not enter the block again. So var left the block scope. However, I could do this right here. Boop, boop, boop. Little let action. You know what I'm saying? Little let action. What happens after I? H, I, J. Smart. You guys didn't catch that, by the way. It's embarrassing. Little J. Little J. And then J. Cool. What do you think will happen? Cool. What's J? J is not defined. So what I mean by var is not block scoped, that means that if I were to run a command with a block, var will leave the block. I'll have access to it outside the block. If I say let is block scoped, that means that outside the block, I will no longer have access to it. Who feels more comfortable about this, like block scoping and the difference between var and let? Cool. Const is not block scoped. I'm sorry. Ugh. Const is block scoped. Therefore, if I were to try to do something similar, will I have const outside of the block? If it is block scoped, will I have access to it outside the block? It is block scoped. Const is block scoped. Can I reference it outside the block? Correct. No. Cool? I know a lot of terms, right? Now you're getting all smart. JavaScript smart. All right, so those are the main differences, right? var, it is not block scoped. You can reassign and redeclare. Let and const, both block scoped. Let can only be declared one time. Reassigned unlimited. Const, block scoped. It can be only declared and assigned. Not 11, but one time. Sorry, that was a little tricky for some of you looking at me. Cool, 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 cool. All right, nice. There's a weird thing called hoisting. Does anyone know what this is? Yes, what's hoisting?
It's the way a JavaScript program compiles. It first declares an assign, or just declares all variables, and then when you try to access them, even if it's been declared further down when you try to access it, it'll still know what it is because it's already been declared.
Yes. So,
Yes.
correct. That is exactly correct. So, let me explain it in like You ever heard of like ELI 5? It's my favorite way to explain things. Explain like I'm 5. All right? And that's kind of like what we are as instructors. We're like that bridge where you can hear something really technical, and then you'll be like, okay. And then you will like ask us a question, just like, look, listen, that didn't make no sense. Can you kind of like bridge the gap for me? So here's what I mean, right? Let's read through what hoisting is as the technical definition, and you tell me if this makes any sense to you. Because variable declarations and declarations in general are processed before any code is executed, declaring a variable anywhere in the code is equivalent to declaring it at the top. This means that a variable can appear to be used before it is declared. This behavior is called hoisting, as it appears that the variable declaration is moved to the top of the function or the global code. Who feels like, you know what, I read that, don't bother explaining, clear as day, right as rain. Yeah? Yeah? No, like you felt good about that definition? Cool. Walk me through it.
Pretty much that means like, I guess we're always used to like, if you want a particular method or variable to run whatever's in it, you want to declare what's in it first and then call it. And I guess all it's saying is that you can call it even though it's defined somewhere else in the code below where you actually call it, and it'll still run.
Very close. Very close. There's like a key thing missing. But it's not important. So let's do this. Ready? Let's talk about some code. Let's do this. I have all this. So let's do this. Ready? I can console log something, right? Doesn't matter what it is. Let's drop 2 of these. All right. In Ruby, let's talk about this. In Ruby, I have a method declaration right here. I'm defining it. And I invoke it before it's defined. Do you see this? Cool. What will happen? Right. Ruby reads top to bottom, left to right. Because I'm trying to invoke something that hasn't actually been declared yet, which happens on the next line, it won't exist. It doesn't work. JavaScript, however, is a little different, a little trickier. Let me do this, right? I have something like var dog equals to cookies, right? The chipchati. Can I console log dog? Yeah? Cool. Cookies. No big deal. Can I console log dog before I declare and assign it? Yeah. What should I see? Okay. Undefined. It's tricky, right? Versus breaking altogether, it will actually come up as undefined. So if we bring this back, what I should see is undefined and then cookies. Here's what's happening. JavaScript will do 2 run-throughs of your code. And this is kind of explained in this like 3-hour video, which I think is so important. The first thing is it will read through your code top to bottom, left to right. And it will assign to memory all the variables and all the functions that you've declared. It will assign it to memory. And then it will read through your code again and then execute. So, for example, in the first read-through, JavaScript will go, oh, cool, nothing again, this is super easy. Console log dog, great. I'm only in the read-through version. I'm not going to execute any code. Oh, cool, var dog. Let's think. Var can be reassigned and redeclared how many times? Unlimited, right? Does it make sense for a computer program to assign this to memory right now, knowing full well that it can, maybe likely, will be reassigned later? It makes no sense, right? So I'm not going to even bother doing that. I'm going to see var dog, and I'm going to do this immediately. I'm going to save it in memory and say, you know what, it's undefined. It's not important what it is right now, because I'm going to get to it later. And then it's going to read 6, cool, blank, 7, blank, oh, another console log, and then a million comments, cool, great. And then it will go through your code a second time and actually execute. So when it gets to line 3 and it's attempting to execute, is dog available in memory? Yes, because of the first read-through. But what is its value? Its value is undefined. And that's based on that first read-through of your code. And then in the execution phase, it will see dog and go, cool, let me give it some cool value, and then it will execute this log here where the value will now exist. So JavaScript, very different from Ruby. Yeah.
So if you change the var to let, would it evaluate as cookies?
No. Let's take a look. So, and I'm going to get to that here in a second. All right? I'll get to that here in a second. So, remember, it reads through and assigns everything to memory. And then on the second run through, it will execute. Are there any questions on like the 2 read-throughs and what's happening? Yeah.
So what if it's in a function where it read through, like if you declare a variable inside a function, would it fix that?
Yes and no. Let me explain that here in a second. That's a very good question. Are there any other questions before I answer that? So the question is, what if I did like function, right? Function doggo, boop, boop. And then this just console logs, all right, right. And then can I do this? Doggo, bloop, bloop. And can I do this? Doggo, bloop, bloop. Who says I can do 6? No problem, all good, airborne. Who says like, I really don't know? Cool, that technical definition a little tricky, huh? It was tricky, a little tricky. So let's find out, let's test. Let's not do anything crazy. And let's do it. Bloop. Actually, I should probably get rid of this. Cool. So this is what's happening. The function keyword in the first read-through, it will assign the whole function to memory. Meaning console log write will exist in memory. So on the second run through, even though I'm invoking dog before it is declared, it still exists and it works. So let's go back to that definition and let's take a look. Because variable declarations are processed before any code is executed, remember there's the 2 phases, right? The first is the run through and saving to memory. The second is the execution. Declaring a variable anywhere in the code is equivalent to declaring it at the top. So what that means is, instead of var dog equals cookies, what this is really saying is var dog. And then later on in my code, when I need it, I'm assigning its value in the execution phase. So this behavior is called hoisting, as it appears that the variable declaration is moved to the top, but that's not really happening. It's because of the 2 read-throughs. Are there any questions on just what hoisting is? Does anyone want to explain what hoisting is? I will leave this definition up as long as you don't read it word for word. Or we could just move on because for whatever reason it's very painful. Yeah. I will just give you the answer right now. Let and const do not hoist. It's only var and the function keyword. But let's not get to that. I mean, that's really basically it. But does anyone want to explain hoisting? Okay. I'm not going to force it. It makes it like a very awkward classroom environment. I can tell who didn't want to do it because you guys immediately like avoided eye contact with me. I'm like, does anyone want to explain hoisting? Anyways, so yes, only the var keyword and the function keyword hoist. So if I attempted to use let here, or const, and then I try to console log dog, this will break, as you've seen. Notice how it doesn't even get to line 6 because my code didn't compile and it ran into an error. So let and const do not hoist. Var and the function keyword hoist. Cool? That being said, given what we learned in the lecture earlier this morning, I can assign functions to variables, right, using function expression. So if I were to do something like, oops, const, right, mega cool function equals to a function, bloop, 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 and I just console log, right, knowing what we know, mega cool function, will this work, yes or no? Will this work, yes or no? Does const and let hoist? Okay, so will this work? I just want to make sure we're mega clear on this. Right? I'm hearing like whispers, you know? No, yes, be good, no. So there's a difference, right? What about this bad boy right here? That's right. So how your JavaScript reads your code, the variable declarations you use are very important. And this is kind of like the weird parts of JavaScript. And you kind of have to like get into it. Sorry, these are like kind of boring, I know. But it's important to kind of talk through them. Are there any questions on hoisting? Does let hoist? Okay. Does the function keyword hoist? Okay. Oh man, so smart. So smart. Cool. It's not that he forgot to put let and const in the language. It's more like it just wasn't a thing. And then people started realizing that when you use var all the time, and then there's like sort of like this memory leaks where var is accessible outside, it was causing really weird bugs. So when ECMA came by and harmonized JavaScript, they're like, we probably should need different variable declaration keywords to prevent weirdo stuff like this from happening. So it was an added feature because of bugs from the original. But very good question. Powerful. Awesome. All right. Do you guys need a break, or do you guys want to keep going? Who wants a break? Who wants to just power through? Wow. Okay. All right. Let's do it. Cool. So JavaScript has something called first-class functions. Do you guys want me to explain it first, or do you guys want to read? Who has you guys like the technical definition first? Or just explain it first? This is a choose your own adventure. You know, I'm just trying to make it for you. Explain it first? Cool, powerful, thank you. All right, so first-class functions, right? A programming language has first-class functions if you can treat a function literally like any other variable. I know that kind of looked like I read this here, but that's basically what it means. What I mean by that is exactly what we did here. Var eat food is a function. When in Ruby have you ever seen this sort of craziness, right? And that is like a method equals to def some method, and then it's like puts and then end. Have you ever seen something like this? You ever seen something like this? You ever like store a variable that holds onto some sort of method? No, that's crazy, right? Except it's kind of not, because JavaScript lets you do it. Because you can literally declare a variable and store an entire function inside of a variable, because functions are just objects. In the same way that I can have just var, right? A stored function is equal to a function, bloop, 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 bloop. Oh, it wasn't gonna get much higher, thank God. And then I can do var, right? I don't know, I'm running out of ideas here. Battery. I found a box of batteries over here. Very creative. Is equal to an object. Because remember, functions are just objects in JavaScript. Powerful. So, what's the power in this? Why would this kind of like be important that I can treat a function like any other object? Yeah, you just pass it around, you know? But pass it around, what do you mean by that? It's kind of, I guess like kind of dicey, you know what I mean? That's right. You can just pass it into another function. So let's try that. Cool. This is weird. Great. Let's do this. I can have a function that says a stored function, right? And just console logs okage. Very good. This is a bad typo I might have. I have another function, all right? And this function will call another function. And this accepts, what do you think this function needs? If it's going to call another function, what do you think it needs? Some sort of function, right? Right? A function as an argument. Cool? And this is what it's going to do. All it's going to do is it's going to take this function and invoke it. This is very, very hard to wrap your head around the first time. Are there any questions on just what I did or what is about to happen? This is a function that is looking for a function. And then all I do is I invoke it. That's it.
How will we do it?
I will explain here in a second. Is there any questions on just this code and what it's doing? All right. By show of hands, who understands what this code is doing? Cool. Any brave soul want to explain what it's doing? That's right. A function that just calls another function. All right. That wasn't complicated. Good job. 10 points to Gryffindor. All right. I'm sorry. Do you watch Harry Potter?
Yeah.
Do you have a house? Okay. 10 points to Gryffindor. We'll just leave that alone. 10 points to Gryffindor. Cool. So if I do something like this will call another function and I pass in like, oh, I don't know, a stored fudge. There it is. I was like scared that the console logs were going to break because of the Chrome DevTools. But it didn't. Are there any confusion as to why we got this like not mistyped, no spelling error, perfect console log? Cool. Who feels like good about this? Like, oh man, that function just called another function. Powerful. All right. So to answer your question, why is this important? Well, we talked about JavaScript affecting the behavior of your website, right? And the idea is that when a user clicks on something, I want a piece of code to run, right? Like if a user clicks this button, then I want this really annoying pop-up that said you just won $10 million. Like, did you? Either way, the point is a user does something and then code will execute. So what this is called is this function is known as a callback. So if this function accepts a function and it is invoked, it will invoke this at a later time. So this is a callback function. It will invoke at a later time.
Is that the same like over?
Not exactly, and we'll get to that. I want to wait until something happens before I invoke a function. I want a user to do something before I invoke a function. JavaScript is an event-driven language. And so by having callbacks, I can wait for a specific event and then do something later. That is why we need to pass full functions into other functions. So I can have a particular function that says, wait for a user to click this button and then do something. What that something is irrelevant. I can have another function that says make annoying pop-up. So if a user clicks this button, it's going to invoke make annoying pop-up, and then that happens. And so callback is useful because JavaScript's event-driven. I have to wait for something to happen so I can do something at that time. Not right now, but sometime later. Yeah, good question. I hope I answered it. I can always dive in deeper if you want.
What's the difference between naming a function and naming a variable and say assign a function?
What is the difference between, you're talking about this function keyword, and then, so the function declaration and the function expression. Right. This is very complicated, and it will affect the way this keyword, let's not equate self and this, but for right now, they are somewhat similar. And so yes. But not really, not at all. But kind of. And that'll make more sense. We'll get into this keyword next week, and it will affect it significantly.
Now, look at the example of it. All right, so you got the variable who is equal to the function who is passed into whatever console.log is. Now, granted, if you have a function that calls another function, and when you call equal pizza, what actually, with the first function you get that argument, or would it just pass it still onto like the function in the function, so to say? Like, can I assign a variable to like a will call another function, a spoke function?
You want me to assign this to a variable?
No, I'm asking like that thing.
It is definitely a thing. I can assign will call another function to a variable.
Right. And all I'm asking is pretty much like, see how they have the equal pizza here? If I did, I guess whatever that variable that we named it, and you said you pass it like an argument, or whatever.
Why don't we do this? Because you're saying a lot of or whatever, or that one right there, it is very difficult to follow along. So if you have a good example, I would simply write out the code, and that way we can all follow along with you. Or if you feel like your question is a little bit more complicated, we can follow up after lecture. What would you prefer to do?
I'm gonna do it.
Great, let's do that. So, are there any questions on callbacks? Cool, callbacks a little tricky, yeah?
So, what if you input the parentheses after return a function, which is reference a function?
That is correct. It will just simply, the question is, if I did not drop these powerful bananas right here, it will return what? The reference to the function. That is correct. And notice that inside this function is when the callback is invoked. Inside this function is when the callback is invoked. This is important. Why did I not put the bananas right here? That's because it's a variable. If I put the bananas right here, it will invoke on this line as it reads through the first time. It will not actually wait until this is invoked, because remember, when this is invoked, then the callback is invoked. If I drop the bananas right here and now, it'll just execute on that line. It will not wait until this one is invoked to invoke.
So if you invoked a stored function inside of, like on that line right there, would it try to will call another function on undefined?
It's not undefined. It will try to invoke a function on the return value of this.
Okay.
This is what, remember, if I put the bananas on this, right? If I put the bananas on it, what does this function return?
It will return undefined.
That's right. This function right here, if I put the bananas on it, will return what? It will return undefined because this function doesn't return anything, just console logs. That being said, if I put the bananas here, it will return undefined. Any questions on that? That means that what I'm really passing in is going to be undefined. If I pass in undefined, can I invoke undefined? No, the answer is no. I can't invoke undefined. So JavaScript is really weird. I passed in a reference to this function so that it could be invoked here. If I invoke it immediately, if I do this, this will attempt to evaluate.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it will attempt to evaluate. And what does this function return? Undefined. So I might as well put in undefined. And undefined is not a function. I cannot invoke it. So here, in order for this to work, I have to pass in the reference. It gets real dicey. JavaScript is hard, but it's okay. We're going to get through it. It's only day one. It's supposed to feel like really weird. Are there any questions on callbacks? Why I pass in the reference? Who feels like they understand why I should pass in a reference as a callback? Okay. Who thinks I should invoke the callback immediately? Like, just put the bananas here. Who thinks that's a good idea? Who knows why you shouldn't do that?
What return you in instead of console log?
Say again?
Instead of console log OKJ, you have return OKJ, and then you put the bananas inside of call around function, a stored function. parentheses.
So let's take a look at a stored function. Boop, boop, boop. If I invoke it, what happens? I get the console log, but what does it return?
But what if you change console log to return?
If I changed console log to return, and you want me to return OKJ, then I will return the string OKJ, in which case I will pass in the string OKJ, and then this will attempt to invoke the string OKJ.
But if you put the bananas after a stored function as the argument for what call around function, with that return OKJ.
Can you try explaining that a little bit more clearly?
So like from the top, if we took out console log and we put return there,
You want me to take this out and put return?
yeah.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's put var. All right, let's name your function. What is the name of your function? This is actually JavaScript, so different language. So JS is great. Cool? And you want me to return the string.
Or it would be equals to function, or is that just the same thing?
You know, you're right. You're totally right. I done goofed. Cool. And you want me to return what? A string? Yeah. Powerful. And I'm just going to end it. So if I invoke JS is great, what do I get? So far, so good. It literally returns the string, yeah. So, what is your question now?
So now if we put we'll call around function, JS is great.
And I pass in one of two things. Either JS is great, the reference, or the invocation. So far, so good. There's kind of like my two options, right? I can pass in either the reference or the invocation. Well, let's think through. If I pass in the reference, JS is great. It will go into the function. So far, so good. All right. And then this returns the invocation to the reference to the function. So if I pass in the reference, what should I get? I should get yeah. Because this is what's happening. JS is great. It's a function. It just returns the string yeah. I passed it in as a reference. So when I return JS is great, what is JS is great when it's invoked? The string yeah. So it will return yeah. That's what's happening. However, if I did JS is great and I put in the bananas here, this is what's happening. What does this evaluate to? What does JS is great return? The string yeah. It's the exact same thing as doing this. Because remember, the function is being invoked and it will execute in line. Like it will literally try to run right here. And when it runs, what does this function return? String yeah. So I'm basically passing in yeah here. So callbacks are tricky. Callback should be a reference to a function so that it could be invoked later.
Were you saying that you would rarely want the bananas inside?
You would rarely want the bananas. There are exceptions to this we will not get into today because I can already tell that there's a lot to handle right now. And it is. It's a lot to handle, right? It's not a unique situation. This is just a ton to handle. Cool?
Just to go down this rabbit hole a little more.
Please.
If we had a function called yeah, it wouldn't invoke that because that's not passing in the reference to the yeah function. It's just passing in a string yeah.
If I had a what now?
If you had a function called yeah.
A function called yeah. Let's.
Alright,
Okay.
function yeah doesn't accept any arguments and it returns hi.
Let's not use yeah. Let's use another one, and that is example 2. Sure. It returns the string hi.
Passed in the string yeah, it would try to invoke the yeah function.
Okay. What do you want it? What do you want to do?
We'll call another function JS is great. The invocation of JS is great, and that returns.
Okay. You're talking about a function that is taking in another argument here.
I wanted to see what would happen if we did will call another function, pass in the string yeah. Would it try to evaluate a function?
You want to pass in the string yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Actually,
It- It will break because a function is not a function. This string yeah gets passed in here, and it cannot invoke.
but I think what he's saying, like if maybe JS is great has one or two options. It could either have yeah or not. And depending on what gets returned, that gets put into we'll call the function. And then there are two separate functions called yeah. And so now
Functions can call functions forever.
yeah, it's like
Functions can call functions forever. You will fall into this maximum stack exceeded because you'll be in an infinite loop.
Good question. So if we did take off the invoke
The what?
where you return the invoke function, the other function, it would return yeah though, right? Like not yeah, but the actual. Like if you scroll up real quick, you see what we have on function, what function, a function.
Yeah.
And when you were trying to put the function invoke in there, you said that it would be yeah, technically. All I'm asking is if we did the return on the next line without invoking it, that one right there, it'll return yeah, though, right?
Correct. If I did not put the bananas here and I wound up invoking it here, it should return yeah.
Right.
Cool. I love the curiosity. So if you have questions, be prepared to try to explain them because it gets hard. It gets a little tricky. Does anyone have any other questions on just callbacks? I could see like a lot of very not confused faces. So I'm here to help.
What I said is a callback, or that's not a callback? That's no callback?
A callback is a function that will be invoked by another function. All right, so questions on callbacks? All right. Cool. So remember, first class function just means that a function can be treated as a variable. To include the fact that a function can be passed in as an argument to another function. There's a lot of like weird terminology here. All right, let's move forward. Yeah, I know. This is like a lot of you right now. Cool. Let's talk about closures, and then we'll wrap it up so we can give your brain a break, because it is a lot. And trust me when I tell you, you're gonna want to ask questions offline. Please do. So, I have a function. I'm just gonna call it closure. All right. If I declare a variable inside here, and this function, guess what it returns? What is this? What does closure return? That's right. What does closure return? Come on now. Say it with me now. Bodegas. That's right. Function, closure, will return another function. Here I'm declaring a variable called cheese. All right? And it's just call it cheddar. This function will return, I like to eat cheese. Based on what you know about scopes, does cheese exist inside this function? Okay, the answer is yes. Because inside this function, cheese is not declared. So what will it do? It will look out. And inside here is cheese declared. Yeet. Yes. So cheese does exist inside this function. Check. I know, it builds up quick. Now let's talk about it. If I invoke closure, what does it return? Cool. And then that means that I can actually invoke that function. Double invoke. Powerful. And so when I invoke it, it returns this function. And when I invoke it again, I'm actually invoking this function that's inside. This whole thing is known as a closure, because I do not have access to this function outside of closure. So this is the closure scope. It is all the variables and the return function. So according to the MDN, the documentation, the technical definition is a closure is the combination of a function and the lexical environment with which the function was declared. What that means is this function, the lexical environment, is anything inside here. So the variable cheese is technically included in the closure. It is not simply the function that's inside. It is the function that's inside and all the variables, the lexical scope. Lexical just means words. Scope that we talked about just means what does it have access to? What words does it have access to? Lexical scope. Words mean things. Cool. Any questions on closures? Yeah.
What if you name that nested function? How would you call it or invoke it?
I cannot, or you can name this if you want, but again, you'll never need to name it because you will not have access to it outside the closure. And that's why this is called a closure. It essentially is encapsulating everything in here so that the global doesn't have access to it. You can extrapolate this and start thinking through, like, this is how you might want to create like private variables.
You will get one in the closure.
It will return a function now.
So the only way to invoke the language function is closure.
Yes. So let's do this real quick. Cool. I have this function, right? So far, so good. Any questions on just the closure function? If I were to say const cool Do you guys have any like interesting variable names? Yep. Equals to closure, and I invoke it. What is the return value of closure? What is the return value of closure? This function. So if I look at yup, what should I get? Just this. Whoops. Just this path. So can I invoke yup? Yup. And I like to eat cheddar. Notice, where is the cheese inside here? It was stored when I invoked this. Var cheese got stored into this function, in which I then saved into the variable yup. Sure?
Variable cheese.
Sure.
What if you have a variable cheese equals cheddar that's outside of the closure function as a local variable?
Yeah. It will absorb it. If cheese is declared outside, remember it looks outside.
Yeah.
And it will store it. And so when I invoke it, it'll be whatever was stored as this variable.
So you don't need inside of the closure.
No. Closure's a little tricky. Callback's a little tricky. All right, I have one last thing for you. It's nothing new. When I was talking about callbacks, right? Log callback is a function that accepts what? A callback function. So which function has to be invoked first in order for callback to invoke? Log callback or callback? This must be invoked first in order for this to be invoked. You understand the sentence? Log callback needs to be invoked first before the callback is invoked. Therefore, log callback, if you were to say in order of precedent, which one is more important? Log callback or callback? Just in regards to like the order of execution. Log callback, right? It has to be, because this will never run if this never runs. So this function is known as a higher order function. A higher order function is a function that either accepts a callback or returns another function. Chill. This is a lot of information. This is just day one. Do not feel bad.